Hello there and welcome Virtual Space Hero community to our today's LinkedIn Live. And as you know, our journey went through the past weeks over hybrid organizations and hybrid work as we started it in February with the first meeting where we had Karen Reed talking about hybrid meetings. And we're still discovering a lot of the challenges that today's organization are facing. And one of the challenges is, as we have experienced in the past 2 years, concerning the factor of onboarding. So many organizations also in the past 2 years had to onboard, even though working from home, even though in the pandemic situation, employees, and onboarding virtually or onboarding for hybrid organizations, we do know that brings another set of challenges. And onboarding before virtual work was already quite challenging because there was a Gallup study showing that only a 29%, so not even 30% of new hires said they felt fully prepared and supported after being onboarded. So that is really almost only a third, not even a third. So we do know that numbers were dropping in the past 2 years. And that is why we're picking up on this topic. And we're going to talk today about how you can onboard and retain your talent in hybrid organizations. And I'm super excited because, again, so he was already with me here on the stage once before last year when we talked about 101 meetings that will be also part of today's discussion. Bruce Tulgan connecting from RainmakerThinking. Hi there, Bruce.
Hi, thanks so much for having me back on. It's a privilege and always fun talking with you.
Thank you very much, Bruce. It is really fantastic that you found the time in your calendar. I know that we had to reschedule due to my bad connectivity in the south last week. So thanks again for your flexibility.
No problem.
I do know, Bruce, that you have a lot of clients that are also struggling and that you work a lot on the topic of onboarding. Let us know a little bit about your background and what your client work is about, please.
Yeah, so we've been doing research and consulting and training on the front lines of the workplace since 1993. We do that with organizations of all shapes and sizes all over the world. And I always say we work for organizations ranging from the United States Army to Walmart and everyone in between. So, onboarding is a huge issue. One of the things we're looking at right now, one of the things we're trying to measure in our research is, well, why do new hires leave? And so when we're looking at what are the top causes of early voluntary departures, and the number two cause of early voluntary departures, that is employees who leave within the first 18 months of a job, the number two cause is a poor onboarding experience. So this is, organizations in every industry are telling us it's so hard to attract people, right? The demand for skilled talent is so much greater than the supply, especially in certain fields. And so organizations spend so much time, energy, and money trying to fill open positions, and then they get new people, and the number two cause of early voluntary departures is an inadequate onboarding experience. So it's very important. It's super important.
Absolutely. Thanks so much also for sharing these recent research results that you gathered from your data. So why do we start onboarding long before a new employee's first day? Why is that important? And what does it mean? Could you sort of dive into that topic a little bit when we talk about onboarding early before they really join the first day?
Yeah, I mean, so look, what our research shows is, so it takes a while to attract somebody. Then you put them through a selection process. Now, if you're smart, you put them through a rigorous selection process, but you do it really fast. But then even if you get somebody to agree, yeah, okay, You've decided you're going to hire this person. They've decided they want to come work for you. But then there's often a gap between offer and acceptance and day one. Well, there's two reasons to fill that gap with communication, right? One is, what if they lose interest? What if they change their mind? What if they get a better offer? Right. So you got to stay in dialogue with them. I mean, some hiring managers are telling us we hire someone, they accept, and then X amount of time goes by, and then the person doesn't even show up. Right now, some people, at least they're kind enough and professional enough to call and say, "Oh, sorry, I got a better offer." But you got to keep up the dialogue, partly just to keep them engaged and to make sure you're showing them, hey, you're important. The position we hired you for is important. You're important to us. We're excited that you're coming. We're staying in dialogue with you. We're excited about it. So that's the first reason. The second reason is you can accelerate some of the onboarding. You can start to make a connection between the individual and the organization. You can start to help the person make a connection with the team. You can start to help that person make a connection with the work. You can start to give them a preview of what the job is going to look like. And you can start to do some of the work of getting them up to speed.
And I think those are super hands-on examples showing us that it's not day one that they show up in the virtual office or in the real office. If we talk about hybrid organizations, it can be the virtual part, or it can be also the headquarter or the office location. But there is a lot that can be done beforehand. And I think this is so valuable. I'm just bringing you one argument that I know. I'm just thinking about Austrian. And in Austria, for example, there are quite a few HR managers that are lawyers, and I do know that the first argument that I'm already hearing in my ears would be, but if the contract is not signed yet and I already let them come into the office and something is happening, we are in a legal disaster. So this is just one constraint that might be there if we invite them on board already before the contract is even signed. Just thinking about that.
Jawohl, ich verstehe. Sondern, now I'm a lawyer too, by the way. And did you know that?
No, I did not. I had no clue.
Yeah, but I'm prohibited by the Bar Code of Ethics from dispensing legal advice in Austria or in Argentina. So this is not legal advice. But yes, of course, you have to dot your I's and cross your T's. You have to be careful. And in Europe, employment law is more complex and more employee oriented. So there are greater obligations and probably greater liabilities. But look, what you don't do is obligate the employee to participate in any onboarding activities prior to their start day. You don't want to obligate them. You don't want to require them. But you can invite them. And it's also the case that, you don't have to give them tasks, responsibilities, or projects. You probably shouldn't, but you can invite them. You can include them. There's nothing in any jurisdiction I'm aware of prohibiting managers from at least sending an email, making a phone call, sending a text. It's sort of like, I'm still excited about our first date. That's sort of what you're saying. I can't wait. It's 2 weeks from Tuesday. I can't wait. Right. That's really what you're doing. And so at the very least, you want to make sure that you're sending a message that they're important, their work is important, that that they're starting, and that you're busy preparing for their arrival. And to your point, if they're in a virtual environment, after all, communicating remotely is what you're going to be doing anyway. So you might as well get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much also for sharing the your background. I had no clue that you were a lawyer. Uh, it's
Well,
probably
I practiced law for 428 days at number two Wall Street in the early 90s. I'm much older than I look, you know, and but I am still a lawyer in a few jurisdictions here in the United States.
it's fun because it also tells a lot about the stereotypes that I have about lawyers, right?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, okay, okay. So the points that you're mentioning are fantastic. We need to think about the personal connection, showing that the person who is joining our team, whether virtual or on-site, is important. And this is also leads me a little bit to one of the questions that one of our virtual space here community members brought to me is, what do you think? How should we reduce paperwork and overemphasize the personal connection? Why is that so important, and what does it mean?
Well, look, sometimes the paperwork, I mean, the paperwork has to get done. You gotta make sure you know the person's full name and their details. You got to make sure I always call it name, rank, and serial number. You got to establish that stuff. And there may be documentation that, again, from a legal standpoint, you're required to share with them, and that you're required to verify that they have reviewed. So there may be safety information. There are compensation and benefits issues. There may be wage and hour laws that you need to review with them and that they need to confirm. And you need to have their basic information. So don't go. Don't eliminate the paperwork. The paperwork has to get done. But what it's all about is making the connection. And what I always tell hiring managers is, think about who's going to rely on this person, and think about who this person will have to rely upon, and start making those introductions. And yes, you want to make the personal connection, but my view is, at least, you want to make the connection, the professional connection. It's a human connection, but it's a professional connection. And so you want to be talking with, okay, so who are all the people I'm going to be relying on? Who are all the people who are going to be relying on me? Those are the ones we're going to start with. And then what you want to ask is, hey, why are you here? Where do you fit in this picture? Where do you fit in relation to the work, right? Not what's your favorite color, right? Not and of course, it's polite to know, if you work with somebody for days, weeks, or months, or years for that matter. It's polite to know, do you have kids? Roughly how many? Are they infants or are they a little older? Sure, okay. But that's not the important stuff. The important stuff is, where do you fit in this picture in relation to the work? Right? What are your tasks, responsibilities, and projects? How do they contribute to the mission? Who benefits from the work you do? Right? When you do a task, when you do a responsibility, when you complete a project, where's the value add? Who benefits from that? So I call that the why, right? And then what? Like, what exactly do you do? Hey, what does your work look like? Hey, do you have any examples of your work? I'd love to see them. And show me, like, what does your work product look like? Oh, well, I turn a wrench. Oh, okay. Show me the machine. What does it look like when you turn that wrench? And then how do you do your work? Show me how you do your work. Hey, do you have a standard operating procedure? Do you have a plan, a project plan? Do you have a schedule? Show me. I want to know what you do and how you do it. Hey, where do you work? Right? Show me, where's your space? Right? And when do you work? Oh, you work in the middle of the night. Gosh, I guess you and I will never meet again. Or right. Or like, hey, what's your schedule? When do you usually work? When's a good time for me to reach out to you when I won't be interrupting you? Right. So this is the who, why, what, how, where, and when of each person at work. And so to me, that's the connection you need to be making. And that's where you want to start. And in terms of the personal stuff, what you have in common is the work. Well, sometimes if you start talking about the personal stuff, you're going to find out, oh, wow, I don't like you. Or what? Gee willikers, our values are diametrically opposed, and maybe I shouldn't have found that stuff out, but what you have in common
The
is
work.
the work. That's what you have in common.
Mm. And I think it's very important what you're bringing up, the who, the how, the what, the when, the where, is something that usually I have with teams that I work with. We try to write our own sort of user manual of the way we like to work, where we explicitly put that in writing, because it's important. Very often I experience, at least working with virtual team members or virtual team leaders, they sometimes are not even aware themselves. How do they really prefer to work with each other? How do they prefer to lead? How do they prefer to communicate? And of course, then we need to have clear agreements when it comes to communication as well, and make that clear, because then also, if you have a team agreement, Canva, for example, that is filled out for new team members, that helps a lot also in the onboarding to understand how is that team communicating with each other? How are
That's brilliant. That is brilliant. A user manual for how to work together. That's brilliant. It's ground rules, right? It's ground rules. Let's agree on some ground rules for how we're going to work together. That's brilliant.
Absolutely. Let me ask you another question, Bruce. What do you suggest? How long should you think about the onboarding process? So your research dives into early voluntary leaves of people. Is the onboarding over? Let's call the onboarding procedure itself. Is it over after a year, after 1.5 years? What is your thing here?
I mean, look, I always say the most important day is every day, and so day one, then day two, then day three, then day four. Look, it's different in different environments, and if you have, for example, a short-term revolving position, so some organizations and some roles, the positions by their nature, they're relatively short term. They're not designed to be long term. So you have to understand the context of the role, and that's a big part of it. But my view is that the intensity of engagement should not diminish. So what happens is, usually you want to program minimum the first 2 weeks. Program every hour. What is that person doing for every hour for the first 2 weeks? But 4 weeks is probably better. The ideal time frame is 13 weeks. Not by accident. 13 weeks is also the length of boot camp. If you join the United States Marine Corps, it's 13 weeks, but it's 24 hours a day.
Oh, wow.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 13 weeks. So that's how long it takes to take an ordinary human being and turn him into a United States Marine. So 13 weeks is a pretty good time frame. But even then, what do we do when we build a Marine, right? After 13 weeks, you don't say, here's a gun, go get the bad guys, right? We send them to infantry school. And after that, we don't say, hey, here's a gun, go get the bad guys. What we do then is we put them in a fire team. And they have a fire team leader who's with them all day, every day, right? So guiding, directing, supporting, coaching. So you remember I said the number 2 cause of early voluntary departures is a weak onboarding process. The number 3 cause is a handoff to a weak, disengaged, or unsupportive manager. So once you're done with your onboarding, you're just getting started, right? So here's my rule. At the very least, you need enough time in onboarding to get the person, give the person a clear connection with the organization, with their team, with the mission, with each person who relies on them and each person upon whom they are forced to rely, and get them up to speed so they have enough knowledge and skill to own at least one task, at least one responsibility, at least one project. Okay, then they're on board. But then remember, the number 3 cause of early voluntary departures is a handoff to a weak manager. So the next piece is you have to hand them off to a strong manager who's going to provide support, guidance, and direction every step of the way.
That's a very good point. And this also brings me a little bit, because clearly leadership, we know the sayings, people don't leave jobs, they leave bad men, or bad organizations, they leave bad managers. But also when it comes to onboarding, and particularly also in a virtual environment, it requires a lot of effort. So would you also sort of sign the following statement that onboarding is everyone's job? So very often in the conversations that we're having, we place a lot of sort of the heavy weight on the shoulders of our line managers, but we also know that they are all overwhelmed, right? So how much time for leadership do they very often left? It's like, I don't know, 20%, if they are lucky. So onboarding is everyone's job. What does that mean for you, Bruce?
Yeah, I mean, but if you're going to give somebody any responsibility, including the responsibility of onboarding, then you have to define it. And you have to tell people exactly what you expect of them. So, for example, what you might say is, I want you to have at least one 30-minute conversation with this person each of their first 4 weeks, right? So that might be a very specific ask. I want you to spend 30 minutes. And then you can give them a script, right? Here's what I do. Here's where it fits. Here's where I might need to rely upon you. Here's where you might need to rely on me. This is the best way to reach me. This is the best time, right? All those conversations. So one thing is you can give people specific assignments. You might tell somebody, hey, I want you, so you're going to teach them something about what you do. You're going to go over your standard operating procedures with them, something like that, or you might say, you're going to take them out to lunch, right? Now that in the olden days, we used to go to a particular location during certain hours for work. And at some point you might go have lunch. But in the virtual world, you say, okay, here's what you do. We're going to decide on a menu. You go cook yours. I'll go cook mine. Then we're going to turn on a screen and we're going to sit there and have lunch together. I mean, that might be a little bit silly, but whatever it is, you've got to define what you want them to do. So just to say, hey, onboarding is everybody's responsibility isn't enough. You have to decide what you're going to ask people specifically to do. And again, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. The best thing you can do is provide context and connection. So, look, those questions are as old as the hills, but it's who, why, what, how, where, and when. Who am I at work? Why am I here? What's the purpose of my job? The what of my job, the how, where, and when. And you might even say, hey, the last person who was in your role, right? Here are the things they did that were great. And by the way, here are the things they did that were not so great, right?
That's a nice one. I think it's also, I'm just thinking about the responsibility of onboarding. If I think about virtual organization or hybrid organizations, for example, we do know that remote first means asynchronous first, which also means a high weight on documentation. So what I see in the virtual organizations as well, just to add that on top, is that there's also some sort of responsibility of the new hire to read through the documentation that is there. And the beauty of a good documentation is that also through that, through the manuals that the organizations such as GitLab or Doist are providing you with, they're even all on the internet for us, not internal people, so they can already get a feeling of what it means to work there and how communication works if there are company-wide guidelines. So everybody, and also other team members, right? So leader, team members, and the new hires share responsibility in the onboarding.
That's brilliant. And yeah, and look, sharing documentation takes a lot less time than spending a half hour with someone. But it's very important if you assign new hires responsibility for reviewing documentation, you have to have a deliverable, right? So they need to be responsible for demonstrating somehow that they've reviewed that documentation.
Absolutely, absolutely, Bruce. But when they are hired, when they are already part of the new team, I want to pick up on the magical 101s that we also touched upon, that we discussed last year, and how they are part of the onboarding and also the ongoing sort of relationship. The most important, 5 most important things of 101s, and why, when, how you should do them. Maybe could you give us a quick dive into the topic? And of course, afterwards, I'm sharing the link as well in this episode about 101s that you published on your own Rainmaker Thinking blog.
Yeah. And so look, one-on-one is where all the action is. Team huddles, team meetings are very important, but they're only good for 3.5 things. Right. The first is for creating a feeling of belonging and togetherness. The second is for communicating a bunch of information to a bunch of people in the same way at the same time. The third is for planning interdependent work, right? Or brainstorming when we have to hear each other and respond spontaneously to each other. The half reason for team meetings is that they so often make it clear that one-on-one is what's necessary. Right? Because in team meetings, let's say you have 6 people there for a half hour. That's 3 hours of productive capacity. It's a big use of time. And so often where the action is one-on-one. And everybody's different. What one person needs from you is different from what another person needs from you. What you need from one person is different from what you need from another person. So one-on-one is super important. And the key is to build a unique dialogue with each person based on what you need from each other. And it should be an ongoing conversation, right? So where do you pick up? Wherever you left off. And the best way to have one-on-ones is to have structure and substance. Structure doesn't mean it's always the same time. Or it doesn't have to always be the same time. Everybody's schedules are different, right? And maybe your schedule is a moving target. Your schedule changes from day to day, from week to week. But structure means at least enough that you can plan and prepare. So, hey, let's have a one-on-one at 4 o'clock today. Right? Or a one-on-one at 10 o'clock tomorrow. Okay, now I can plan and I can prepare. And the best way to plan and prepare is in writing. So this makes a huge impact, because it means I'm going to get organized. Even if we don't have the call, I'm going to get organized. I'm going to plan and prepare. It's like studying for a test. Okay, so now I'm organized. Now I've done the planning and preparation. And what are the things that we should talk about? It's not just, oh, here's what I did. Here's a status report. That's important. Here's what I did. Here's a status report. What did we talk about last time? What commitments were made last time? Okay, now I'm going to give an account. Did I meet that commitment? Right? So that's very important. But it's also important for troubleshooting and problem solving. Hey, let's talk through this together so we can anticipate problems and avoid them. Let's talk this through so we can identify problems while they're still small and solve them before they turn into big problems. Let's talk about resource needs so that we can make sure we're going to have the resources we need, or if we don't have the resources we need, that we can anticipate that and either figure out how to get them, or how are we going to work around this resource gap. And let's make sure that we've got a plan of action, and that, hey, if there's too much to do and not enough time, let's talk about priorities. Let's talk about what's going to go on the back burner, and what's going to, priorities are all about what might not get done. So what are we going to, what might not get done? What do we want to make sure gets done today? And how are we going to rely on each other? And then when are we going to talk next?
Again, yeah.
So that right. So that's the format. It's you want to structure to plan and prepare. Yes, you want to pick up where you left off, what commitments, and give an account, and then troubleshooting, problem solving, resource planning, and making sure that we have a plan so we go in the right direction and don't waste time.
Absolutely. And I think one-on-ones also, just for the community out there, we have been discussing that also in other sessions and other live shows or other episodes, that one-on-ones are very powerful, particularly if you're working in a virtual or in a hybrid organization. And that is how you retain talent. But just doing a one-on-one for the sake of doing a one-on-one doesn't make sense. That's why we refer to Bruce in our show notes then with the link to his article about one-on-one meetings, because structure and the possibility to prepare for them are so important. Bruce, thank you so much for coming again on the show, for sharing again with us your wisdom and your experience about today's questions, how to onboard and retain your talent in hybrid organizations. And don't forget to check out also RainmakerThinking.com. There is a fantastic blog with a lot of inspirational articles there, and connect with Bruce also on LinkedIn here. Bruce, nothing left to say. Thanks again. I'm super, super thankful that
Thank you so much. You're awesome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.
So fantastic. Virtual Space Hero community. Bruce again was here, and thank you also very much for providing us with your questions ahead. I do know that not everybody can join live, but also these LinkedIn lives are still available after the live show. They are also on YouTube where you can check them out. And I hope we stay connected. So continue sending me in your questions for upcoming shows or potential guests. There is a form on my webpage, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing from you. Stay tuned and become a virtual space hero. Bye.